Good morning. My name is Lenka de Mauro. I am head of European International Affairs at the German Insurance Association. And I would like to welcome you all to our today's event in the series GDV Live. Today we will discuss the much-awaited proposal by the European Commission for regulation on harmonized rules and artificial intelligence. And I'm very happy to be joined by three distinguished and expert speakers on the topic. Marcel Kolaya, Kilian Gross, and Wolfgang Hauner. A very warm welcome to the three of you, and once again, thank you for accepting our invitation. I will introduce the panelists in the course of the discussion, but before we kick off, I'd like to invite the audience to use the possibility of interacting with us and send us your comments and questions on Twitter by using the hashtag GDVLive, and on LinkedIn via the LinkedIn event page, where you can also follow the event. Now, without further ado, I'd like to give the word to our speakers. And in this first round, I would like to take a little step back and have a look at the world before 21st of April, when the Commission presented its proposal. By the way, the first of its kind, not only in Europe, but globally. Let me start with you, Marcel. Marcel is Vice President of the European Parliament for the Greens and European Free Alliance Group. Since 2010, a member of the Czech Pirate Party and computer scientist by formation. Marcel, you focus your parliamentary activity on functioning of society in the digital age. On your blog, you write about AI development in Brussels. You've been involved in the recent discussions on AI in the European Parliament in several committees, among others also a special committee on artificial intelligence, AIDA. So what is your personal view on AI regulation, and how do you see the discussions in the EP that preceded the Commission proposal? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to this event to discuss a very important topic that only seemingly is digital, because artificial intelligence is a technology that is going to affect, and it has been already affecting, our daily lives outside the digital world. So it's an extremely important topic. When it comes to the regulation that the Commission introduced or put forward, first of all, I would like to thank the Commission for putting forward that proposal. Because, as said, it's very important that we have rules for a technology, or to be more precise, for the use of technology that is going to affect our. What I personally think about the AI regulation as proposed is that I miss more levels of risks in that regulation. The regulation foresees a distinction to high risk and low risk applications, which, I mean, it's fair to say that not all artificial intelligence applications impose an enormous risk. So the distinction is fine, but I believe that it's also not sufficient, that it should be more levels, because we can speak about AI in vehicles. We can speak about AI used in search engines or algorithms on social networks, and we can speak about AI that maybe only helps with some administrative stuff. And these three are very different levels of risks, and having only two levels means that something that should have some stricter rules falls into the category of the low risk, which is a problem. Now, my second comment on the regulation is that I think that self-assessment, as foreseen by the regulation, for sensitive high-risk applications is not sufficient, and such applications should undergo a third-party assessment. And my third and last comment for the beginning of the discussion would be on transparency and verifiability, where I would expect more transparency that would allow more verifiability for the high-risk applications, because according to the regulation, only non-technical documentation needs to be made available. But that also, in many cases, does not really make sense when one cannot understand how actually the particular AI application works internally. When it comes to the discussions in the European Parliament that preceded the proposal, I mean, it's very clear that this area is very important, is seen as a very important for the European Parliament, because the European Parliament issued in total 6 own initiative reports on it, from where we approached artificial intelligence from several aspects. So it's the ethical aspect, civil liability aspect, IPR, international law, law enforcement access, and then education, culture, and audiovisual sectors. So you can see that already by the number of the own initiative reports, the Parliament sees it as a very important topic. The main political discussion was about how to preserve, or at least from my perspective, how to preserve innovation while also making sure that there is no interference with fundamental rights. And one specific concern was that bias can occur, and then is discrimination against people of color or vulnerable groups, you name it. Finally, and this is where I stop, there is a very special political concern of mine, which is the use of artificial intelligence for the purpose of biometric recognition, where I would like to see a ban on a use of such technology in public spaces, because that very easily allows mass surveillance. And apparently, I'm not the only one in the Parliament. The Parliament, seems to go also that direction, given the reports that I have named. And I think that this is, again, a point where the regulation, it would be better if the regulation would be more strict in this sense. But that's also why we have the process of the Commission proposing the regulation and then the Parliament and the Council work on it.
Thank you, Marcel. Thank you for these already quite concrete observations on the proposal. I'd like now to turn to the Commission and represented here by Kilian Gross. Kilian is a long-standing Commission official and has served, among others, as a member of the Cabinet of Commissioner Oettinger, but most importantly for this discussion, he is currently head of Unit on Artificial Intelligence Policy Development and Coordination in the Directorate General Communications Networks Content Technology of the European Commission. Hence, the person to speak to when it comes to the AI regulation. Kilian, it has been a long way to this proposal. Which considerations have driven the Commission to regulating AI? So to say, what is its history? I know Marcel has now addressed already some concrete points, but if you can give us these overall, let's say, the considerations that have brought the Commission to the decision to regulate horizontally technology or some applications when this technology is used.
No, thanks, Lenka. With pleasure, and of course, I would like afterwards. I'm very happy to discuss a bit with Marcel, because we are grateful for this first feedback and exchange. Because, as I said, just in our little warm-up talk, we had a lot of preparation, a lot of thought went into this proposal. But now, of course, it's time to discuss it and to see different views, and that's very, very important. But you asked a bit about the history, and I think it's a good question, because this proposal is not just a new invention, an idea which we just had and we quickly implemented. This has a long history, because we started this journey on AI practically in 2018 with the first strategy on AI, and we always had this idea of a twofold approach in the Commission, namely to build on excellence, to support the technology, because we think it can do a lot of good. We see this in the COVID crisis, for vaccines, for tracing, for lots of different things, for the climate transformation, climate change, energy transformation. It's very important. But at the same time, it carries certain risks. So the Commission has from the beginning had the idea we need both. We need to make sure that it's trustworthy where it's risky, but at the same time, we want to achieve a lot of investments in AI because we think it can bring a lot of benefits if it's done according to our values to our society. So we have this ambitious target of having 20 billion euros investment in AI per year in the EU, private and public, European and national, during this decade. But we always said at the same time, we have to look as well at the risks, because there are real risks which we need to cover. So that was our approach, and on this basis we have created a high-level group which worked for 2 years on this project, and as well worked on both strands. They came up with recommendations for investments, but they came as well up with a tool to assess high-risk AI tools, the so-called ALTAI tool, which you can find on the web, which is a self-assessment tool, which I think is very well done, with a lot of questions, and which has been tested with more than 300 undertakings before it went online. And this is really the basis for what we propose. Because if you look at the criteria, to look at the requirements, now we have 5, they had 7, but in reality, these requirements are very similar. They're really built on what the high-level group has worked on. And that we have taken up then in this white paper, which we published in February last year, in February 2020. And then we had the public consultation, which was very extensive because we had more than 1,200 submissions and more than 400 position papers. And really, it showed there is a huge interest. And it's not only the economy, but it's all over Europe. It's civil society. It is scientists. It's academics. It's really all about a very, very mixed, a very rich audience and a very rich discussion. And what drove us now, as I think at the first block in the world, to really legislate in such a comprehensive way, because we see others are thinking about it. Maybe we talk a lot with our international partners, and we see as well that now in the US things are moving. But I think we're a bit more advanced because we take a comprehensive view. Others are more looking at very specific risk and just targeting the sectorial measures, very, very specific items of this problem. We thought about it, and our underlying idea is that in order to make AI in Europe a success, and that is what we want. We want AI, but we want AI, as our president put it, made in the European way, respecting European values. And we want to create there the benchmarks for what is a value-based technology and the value-based use of this technology. We think that we need to have certain rules. And we think that the artificial intelligence displays certain risk features which are inherent in all AI applications, which you find whether the AI is embedded in a product or whether the AI is self-standing and is used, for instance, for recruitment or biometric identification or other uses. And these are, it's a bit of a black box. You don't always know why a certain output was based on a certain input. It's difficult sometimes to trace how a decision was made. And it's difficult for the individual to understand, and this may cause safety risk, but this may as well cause a risk to fundamental rights, because it may be difficult afterwards to challenge a decision if then the decision maker says, well, I relied on my AI and I don't know why your recruitment file was discarded, because we relied on the system. So we think there is a need to do something, and this is inherent for all AI, that it makes sense to address this comprehensively in a horizontal act, which is rather unusual, that we regulate horizontally a family of technologies like AI. And at the same time, what we wanted to achieve with this proposal is that it's a risk-based proposal, because we want as well to give the clear message that we think a lot of AI does not carry any risk or is very low risk. So in the impact assessment, we said we believe that 10 to 15% of AI is really high risk. Marcel has pointed to that. You could have imagined even more risk categories. Here we try to find a very fine balance between what is practical and what is accessible and manageable and what is really representing reality. You know, the German, for instance, the Data Ethics Commission had more risk categories. You can have more sophisticated systems, but that leads then as well to legal uncertainty, because the third thing we wanted to achieve in order to balance the interest is to have a regulation which is very clear, because we don't want a very complex assessment and analytical exams to be put on economic operators and developers, because that could be a deterrent for them, because then they would feel they need always legal advice or compliance management just before they can do something. So we want to have a rather straightforward regulation. That is a bit, I think these are the founding ideas of what we have presented on the 21st of April.
Okay, thank you very much for this, let's say, little history or long history before this proposal has been presented. Now, I'd like to close the first round by giving the word to Wolfgang. Wolfgang Hauner is head of Group Data Analytics at Allianz. In this role, he is responsible for shaping and driving the Allianz Group's strategic agenda for data analytics and artificial intelligence. His career has provided him with a unique combination of global business and technical expertise. And Wolfgang joined Allianz from Munich Re, where he most recently acted as Chief Data Officer and successfully defined and executed on the data and AI strategies. So Wolfgang, can you give us some practical and business insight? What are we talking about when we speak about AI applications in the insurance industry? Please, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thanks for the introduction, Lenka. So first of all, AI already plays a very important role in the insurance industry, and in particular for us at Allianz. On the other hand, in almost all cases, AI is not yet directly customer facing. So the most applications we have in AI are for efficiency and productivity gains, and also for getting new data-based insights through AI. So understanding, e.g., underlying risks better. That is the main area where we use AI today. Always we have in mind to add value for our customers. So this comes for us always first. So keeping and even building further the customer's trust into what we do and what we offer is for us of utmost importance. To the question of where do we use AI, it is used more or less along the complete insurance value chain already. And we could cluster the value chain into 5 steps. So that is starting with product development. Here we use it, for example, for product design. So we understand through the analysis of data, what do customers need, what do they want, and where do we have to adjust products. Then it's also about understanding our portfolio developments better. Where are we making profits? Where are we losing money? And both is important to understand more precisely in order to become more competitive. So in areas where the prices are too high and we still have some margin, we can lower prices to become more competitive. But in others, there may be a need to increase prices, because otherwise we continue to lose money in areas where they're not profitable. So here AI helps us to do our business simply better, but it's not completely new applications of AI. In marketing, so it's about who do we offer our products to, and this is again no new methodology. It's just getting refined. So you can think of this also as an evolution. So there have always been models to allocate, for example, marketing spend. In which channels do you allocate the money, and which customers do you target for which products? Here, AI also helps us to do this more precisely. It also helps us to understand, again, customer behavior. So are there customers who are likely to terminate their policy for various reasons? And if we can see this, can we do some better offerings for the customer? That would be typical applications. Then clearly it's about in the sales area, up and cross-selling opportunities. It's also making the sales process easier, not just thinking about the commodity products like motor insurance or household insurance, but if you look into the commercial world, there are hundreds of questions typically you have to answer before you can get to a policy. And here we already provide a lot of information through AI to the agent in order to understand the subject better, understand what is relevant for under risk, and then make a quicker offer to the customer. And of course, it's the risk assessment itself. It's understanding the underlying parameters better. And here also AI, in particular explainable AI, can help us to understand what are the drivers for increased or decreased risk, and then reflect that again in the pricing and underwriting. And of course, it's also a lot about efficiency in the claims handling and claims processing. So here it's a lot about automation. We use many technologies like image-based damage assessment or natural language processing to automatically read and scan documents, understand what this is about, and then allocate the work to the right specialist. So that would be all typical use cases. And of course, also AI is helping us in the operations. But as I said in the beginning, very few cases where AI would directly interact with the customer at the moment. That may be the case in voice bots or chat bots, for example, in call centers, where we may use this for non-complex interactions with customers. But here already today, we inform the customer that he's now talking with a machine. It is made very transparent that this is not a human being on the other end. And again, it's for the benefit of the customer. Nobody wants to be in a waiting line for 30 minutes, listen to not so nice music in most cases. But if you just want to change your address or your bank account, why not do this with a machine, and then you're done within a few minutes. So that would be the typical use cases and application today, at least.
Thank you very, very much, Wolfgang, and thank you to all three of you for laying a bit the ground, let's say, for this discussion. And as some concrete observations on the proposal have been done already, but I'd like to give now Kilian the chance to guide us briefly through, let's say, the main approaches and the cornerstones of this regulation. I think some of was said already, but let's have the framework so everybody is on and the audience on the same page. Thank you.
Thanks, Lenka. This is of course not an easy ride, because the regulation is, I think, has more or less 80 pages. So to give you the key points, I have to cut out a lot, but I will try to give at least some elements. I mentioned a bit the principles, and on this basis, so we wanted a horizontal legislation, a risk-based legislation, and a clear legislation. These are, I think, perhaps some keywords you want to take home with. And on that basis, perhaps if you look at what we have done, you will find that. So on the definition, which is of course key, we took the definition from the OECD, which is a rather open definition and allows some further development. And we have at the same time added an Annex 1, where we have identified very concrete techniques, which should really then fall under that regulation and which can be amended over time via delegated acts. This is the kind of technique we use in a number of places. We create a frame, and then we allow implementation to come in, because we are dealing with a very fast-moving target as AI. So we don't know what happens in 2, 4, 5 years. But we need to be prepared, and we don't want, on the other hand, we don't want to be unclear in any respect. Second, we have created this risk pyramid. To start from the bottom, we think a lot of AI is unrisky. Then we have certain AI applications where we think there are limited risks or specific risks. I think it's better to speak then about specific risks, which we can cover with transparency obligations. So we don't impose quality requirements, we impose mainly transparency. And these are namely chatbots, where you should be informed. I mean, I'm grateful that this was just mentioned. Wolfgang. The second would be the emotional recognition and biometric categorization, where you should be informed so you can step out. And the third would be deepfakes, unless this is given by the context or part of your freedom to express yourself. Because there we think it's very important for democracy that normally you can rely on what you see. And then we have, this is the specific risk. And then we have the category of high risk, which is, of course, the core of the regulation, even if it's a minority of the applications. This is important to notice, because we should not go home with the impression now all AI is regulated. We speak here about 10 to 15% of the applications probably. Here we distinguish, we take the AI embedded in products, where we look mainly at safety aspects, not only, but that's a bit the focus. And here we link it in Annex 2 with the existing specific safety legislation, sectorial safety legislation. And we say basically products for which you undergo now already the highest safety examinations of third-party conformity assessment, there you should do the same for the AI. I simplify a bit, but that's a bit in a nutshell the idea. So we follow in reality the risk assessment, which is already present in the product legislation. So we align and we basically introduce another layer of checks within one ex-ante conformity assessment for the AI part. And then we have the more innovative part, if you wish, which is Annex 3, which are the self-standing AI solutions. Here we have created 8 categories on the basis of a risk analysis. And I speak to insurers today, so I don't need to tell you what a risk analysis is. You know this certainly much better than we do. But we've tried and we have identified 8 categories. And in these 8 categories, we have named certain use cases. And these use cases are really then the ones where the high risk criteria will apply. And they may be adapted over time. And for instance, recoupment would be one if you have AI using to filter out certain applications. If you find yourself on these lists, so that should be easy to operate, you look, is what I do an AI, and do I fall under one of these categories, namely, am I listed in Annex 3 or Annex 2? Then you have to undergo the ex-ante conformity assessment, which is mainly based on the 5 criteria which the high-level expert group had developed. That these are the same, well-known: data quality, transparency, documentation, human oversight, information. And then you have to undergo this ex-ante conformity assessment. And at the end, you will get the CE label, or you have to be registered if you have a self-standing AI. Just to come back to what Marcel has said, we believe that for the self-standing AI, we will start with an internal check, because this is as well a fully fledged ex-ante conformity assessment. This will be sanctioned. There is an ex-post market surveillance, so you should be as careful as you will be if you do it with an external check. And we have preserved the possibility later on, if the Commission sees it does not work, to move on to the external check via delegated acts that may be needed. But we think, as this is new for the operators, we don't want to make it too difficult for the operators, because they don't know, normally they don't need to go to an ex-ante third-party assessment. So now it's already a big step that they have to do this by themselves. Then we have on the top of the pyramid the prohibitions, which are important, because here we think the use of a certain AI is so socially harmful that there should be an outright prohibition. And this we find for subliminal manipulation. So below your consciousness, you see zips on the screen which you can't really identify, and you're manipulated. Exploitation of children and other vulnerable people, which cause physical or psychological harm. The general social scoring by public authorities, so giving benefits according to some points which you distribute. And last but not least, the biometric identification in public spaces for law enforcement purposes. This is, of course, a broader topic. I could go more into detail, because here we foresee some narrow exceptions, because we believe it should be very strictly regulated, it should be prohibited, but we need, for instance, for terroristic attacks, we need some small exceptions if member states so wish. So it's not a direct authorization, it's just a possibility for member states to introduce this if they so wish. And you should not forget, all biometric identification will be high risk, so the systems will be checked on their quality. And then we have some measures in the regulation for support of innovation. I don't want to forget this. For SMEs, we have sandboxes, we have a bit of facilitation for data processing. We have lower fees for SMEs, and for startups, we really gave a lot of thought in how to avoid stifling innovation with this. And then, I don't want to be too long, we have, I think, a relatively straightforward governance system, but I can come back to this if you so wish. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kilian. That's fantastic. You really managed, like in 7 minutes, to give us a right through proposal. Now, Marcel, you already gave some reflections in your initial comments, but after Kilian has sort of, let's say, laid out the whole structure, would you like to add something on this, and would maybe give me, I know this might be difficult, but a little bit, a little look into how you think this could go in the EP, based on the huge interest of your colleagues and the different committees involved. How do you see this legislative procedure going on from this point?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I will not be able to predict what the outcome from the European Parliament will be. I still didn't buy a crystal ball, and I believe that everyone in the insurance business wants to own one. But maybe, let me first go a bit through the proposal again, to maybe add a bit on top of what I said in my introductory speech, which is on the definition, for instance. If you look at it, how it is defined currently in the regulation, including in the annex, you will see that the definition is quite broad, actually covering a very large set of software, even including statistical approaches, a Bayesian method, which from a perspective of how scientists define artificial intelligence, I would say that is not really part of that scientific definition. On the other hand, I need to say that this does not necessarily need to be a problem, because the question is not only like what everything falls into the scope, but then what do we plan to do with that? What are the obligations for those that are in scope? So if we work with that in the right way, I think this does not necessarily has to be a problem, because I mean, for instance, speaking about Bayesian method, for instance, spam filters apparently would then fall into the scope. But also, I mean, the same technique can be used for very different applications, like, I don't know, defining what to do with an application for a mortgage, but also, being in now, talking to insurance businesses. I mean, that is also a way how to maybe look into possibilities for individual rates on insurance or anything like that. So I mean, like, you already sense that there is very different applications using the very same technique. So maybe including it in the scope is not a bad idea after all. And we need to more look into how the technology is applied rather than what. Then I wanted to spend a couple of words on supervision, because the way how this is set up is that there are national authorities that the member states have to designate, plus there is this European board, and it looks very similar to what we have in the GDPR. And we also know that one of the major problems of the GDPR is not the regulation per se, but is enforcement of GDPR. So over here, I mean, there are some differences. Not sure if we need to really dive into the details, but the major difference probably is that the regulation doesn't seem to appoint any lead national authority and leaves it up to the member states to coordinate. But still, I mean, given any differences in that, my major issue with that is that the GDPR has shown that this decentralized enforcement may not work efficiently because the businesses are not spread across member states proportionally. And we see a lot of businesses in Ireland, for instance, and then if we have a decentralized system and then we pretty much like overload one particular competent authority in one particular member state, then the enforcement may not work. And that's why I need to say that I would have preferred one centralized European authority that would have enough capacities to deal with all that is needed across the whole union. And on the mentioned sandboxes, my last point, I think it's not particularly a bad idea to have something like this. It, of course, will be important, how exactly this will be implemented, and there should be an implementing act from the Commission on this. what I find important is that we need to make sure that not only large companies can participate, but also SMEs, and also free and open source software projects, consisting of volunteers, so that the framework is done in a way that they could participate as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's again a lot. A lot of points already addressed, and I think Kilian probably would also like to react to some. But before I give you the word, Kilian, I'd like to have a first reaction on the framework and the approaches by Wolfgang. How do you see the general approach taken by the Commission?
Yeah, overall, the approach definitely goes in the right direction. I mean, it's very important, given the economic and societal potential of AI within the EU, that there is a well-balanced legal framework around this, and that will certainly help us to increase the acceptance of AI also for customers, or for every human being basically in the EU. So that's quite important to have that. On the other hand, and Marcel was mentioning this already, we also have to watch carefully that we do not come in with unnecessary requirements that in the end would hamper innovation. So this needs to be well balanced. And for the insurance industry in particular, I would say we do not need a specific regulation for AI regarding insurance or special guidance. I mean, we have sufficient legislation, be it data protection, consumer protection, competition law, labor law, anti-discrimination. So there are already a lot of frameworks in place that are valid, that are good, that we follow. And of course, that also has to be the case in the context of using AI. What is very positive is, and what would be also a key requirement from the insurance industry, that this is clearly following a risk-based approach. So I think in this regard, the current proposal is very good, because it's not per se an industry or AI as a whole which is a risk or is bad or needs to be regulated, but it's always the context in which it is used. And therefore, I appreciate very much that we look into the specific use cases and then do an assessment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, the definition has been addressed by Marcel. He said it's quite broad, but maybe not a problem. Would you maybe, Kilian, like to react? Why have you have opted for such a broad definition? We've also seen the statistical methods included and thought, okay, this is quite broad, but so maybe you can explain the reasons and how it fits in the whole framework.
Well, I think Marcel has put it already quite well. I mean, the definition we have used is not our invention, it's a definition from the OECD. So that's, in our understanding, probably the most internationally recognized definition of AI. This is indeed rather open, which is as well due to the fact that, of course, AI in reality, if you look at it in detail, is a family of technologies which are fast evolving. And it's very difficult to say this is now AI and this is not AI. And so we thought it makes sense to take this relatively wide definition, which nevertheless has found the support from all of our member states, international partners or like-minded partners in the OECD, because this is and then to give these concrete elements in Annex 1, because it allows as well to be technology neutral, because we don't want to discriminate a certain technique within that family of technologies, so that you push towards one direction because you single out something. And at the same time, we believe that what is really relevant is, of course, whether these techniques, which we have listed then in Annex 1, can display the risk features which I've mentioned in the beginning. So the opacity, the data dependency, the lack of the non-deterministic structure, so which are the real reason for this regulation. So now this is right. We cover a lot. We don't cover everything. I mean, there were There were even, I can disclose this now, there were even discussions whether we should not be completely neutral and say every decision-making, automatic decision-making process should be covered, and we only look when it's risky, it should be under the regulation, and that we didn't want, because then again, it would have been very unclear, and we would always be left alone with the question, is this risky or is this high risk? And you would have to bear, as an economic operator, the burden and the doubt. So we think it's fairer to be clear on this, but indeed, a lot of techniques which are mentioned in Annex 1, it will really depend on the use. Because I think their Marcel is right. A lot of uses are completely innocent or are not dangerous, and you can use them. And even if you are then under the definition of AI, nothing will happen to you, because you will neither be a specific risk nor a high risk, and you can just continue to do your AI as you did before. Because there are these two steps. You need first to be in the definition and in the scope of AI, and then you need to fall into one of the risk categories where we really impose rules. And as I said in the beginning, we are convinced that the vast majority of the AI applications, even if they are AI, they will not fall in these risk categories. Therefore, I think if you look at it in the ensemble, I think the system makes sense, and is sufficiently precise and limited.
Okay, thank you for this specification. So practically, well, the scope is not only defined by the AI definition, but the whole structure and the criteria established in Article 6 and 7 are understood. Now the governance and supervision has been already also addressed. There is the main structure is decentral, based on sectorial and national authorities, if I understand this well, but you also foresee a board. Can you explain the reasons for this and the interaction of the two levels? I mean, of course, we have a regulation, so we want to create something that is there for the internal market, and we want, you yourself said, and the Commission explained that we want something that promotes, let's say, AI in Europe. So for sure, the governance structure is also an important part in order to create this let's say field. So can you maybe explain and also react to what Marcel said on why the basic decision for the decentral governance?
Yes, of course, with pleasure. I mean, we discussed this a lot, and Marcel is right. There is, in certain areas, a problem that the application of EU law in different member states varies, and that can even push operators to go to certain member states because they believe they may have a regulatory advantage, because the implementation or enforcement of certain rules in some member states is less efficient than in others, which is something the Commission works on, of course, because this is clearly unsatisfactory. And we thought about this. And therefore, I understand, of course, that Marcel says, well, then have a central European agency or something. He didn't mention the agency, but a central European body who should assess this. We thought a lot about it, and we believe that in Europe, we will have a lot of AI, hopefully, and we have differentiated administrative structures in the different member states, and we have a principle of subsidiarity as well, so we should respect that. A lot of member states have bodies, administrations in place which do certain things which are partly overlapping with our regulation, and will probably use these bodies and agencies and administrative structures to do the new work. And it would be excessive to override this with a completely new structure and oblige them. I give you an example. A good part of the AI will be embedded AI. That will be AI in a car, in a drone, in a medical device, in a toy, what have you. These products are already subject to ex-ante third-party conformity assessment, and they go to notified bodies in the member states. And in the future, we don't want them to go to another body to do this, but they should normally go to the same body, and the body should then be certified as well to do the AI test, because otherwise we would duplicate administrative burden. Of course, the body who does then the checks needs to have a certification for the AI part, and if he doesn't do it, he may subcontract it, or he may lose a certain group of products with AI. But this is a structure which works very well, and I don't see the member states wanting to set up a completely new structure. Like for cars, this is a very well-established system, which you know in Germany very well, with the Kraftfahrzeugbundesamt and others, which does these things. And of course, we leave it to member states to decide whether they want to entrust it to them, but we are pretty sure that most of the member states will take the existing structures and then add these tasks to these bodies. For the self-standing AI, this is of course a bit more tricky because there really we create new structures. But here again, we have identified for law enforcement, they should take the DPA or the structures in the area of law enforcement, like in the administration of justice, because for data protection reasons. Or we have for the financial market, we have identified they should take the financial supervisory authorities. For the rest, I think we need to leave member states a certain choice whether they prefer to have a horizontal body dealing with this, like the data protection authority, or whether they prefer to go for sectorial bodies like the labor administration to do the part on labor and the Ministry for Education to do the part on education. This, I think it's a bit difficult for us in Brussels to decide this for each member state. And I think member states would not really appreciate that on their side neither. What we, on the other hand, want to do, and because we realize that Marcel has a point, that this may lead to some divergences, is that we say member states need to tell us who is responsible. And we have put into the regulation that whoever is then responsible needs to have sufficient financial and human resources in order to do the task. So we will make sure, and member states should think twice if they want to have too many bodies doing this, because if you want to have an IT specialist doing this, it will come with certain costs. And we will have a default option with the National Supervisory Authority, which will report to us. And then we want to create a central structure with the European AI board, where every contact point, every supervisory authority, every member state should create a supervisory authority looking over their system. And this body will have a place in this AI board where we, the Commission and the European Data Protection Supervisor and these national supervisory authorities will come together to check the consistency. And that should then be the place where we can discuss together with the member states how this works and what is share best practices and try to align. This is the idea. Therefore, we need this AI board in order to update the system. And we may later on add an expert group to this to have even a broader representativeness. That's something we need to see, but I think this could make a lot of sense. But for the administrative part, we really need, I think, then the heads of the supervisory authorities together with the Commission reporting back so they can make sure if there are incidents, complaints, or about different varying levels of controls and checks, that there is consistencies ensured, and that in particular, and I think in reality the real problem is that these bodies have sufficient resources, that they're really able to have the skills and the resources to do this task properly.
Okay, thank you. Well, on this point, and maybe also on the one already as well raised by Marcel, to you, Wolfgang, Allianz is a multinational present in Europe in 23 markets. Do you see the point in the central governance, and would Allianz be interested in using an AI sandbox?
Yeah, so that clearly, and this was mentioned by Kilian already, that those functions should be integrated in the existing supervisory framework in order not to have another channel we have to report to or where we get controlled by. So that would clearly make life easier for the insurance industry, in particular for us. Overall, we very much appreciate that there is a harmonized EU-wide approach to the regulation of AI. As we are present in almost all countries in Europe, that helps us regarding harmonization of our own processes and products. So we are, as Allianz, currently in a group-wide transformation initiative where we want to harmonize our products and processes for the benefit of the customer. And clearly, if we see the same rules apply in all European countries, that makes this effort much easier also for us. And therefore, we highly appreciate that this is a EU-wide initiative. And yeah, so that's our view on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm conscious of time. Almost reached the last minute. Then I'd like to have a quick closing round and have your let's say your conclusive remarks from you, Marcel and Wolfgang. The question would be our title that we have chosen for this session is Innovation Through Trust, Building and Protection. Has the Commission proposal achieved, in your opinion, this aim, or are they more or less there? Maybe first to you, Marcel.
Yeah, I'm aware that we don't have much time left, so I'll try to be brief. I would say that the regulation is not as human-centric as I would have hoped for, because my political group aims at a regulation that that creates an environment for a human-centric artificial intelligence, because we also must see that the artificial intelligence is not here for the artificial intelligence. It's for the purpose of have a better, more well-working and efficient society. So we must take that point into consideration, and with the concerns that I have voiced in during the course of this conversation, like not enough categorization for high risk, low risk applications. So there should be more categories, in my understanding. Missing some banned practices like mass surveillance, face recognition in public spaces, etc. This is something that I would like to see more, so that we have a better balance.
Thank you, Wolfgang.
Well, I think it's definitely a good approach going in the right direction to build trust in AI. And I agree to what Marcel said. It should benefit the humans, clearly. And that applies, of course, also to all insurance customers. So here we have an aligned interest. And for us, it's important that our customers can gain more trust into those new methods and the new technologies. Therefore, we support also transparency on how we use it, where we use it. But I see that the proposal as such goes definitely in the right direction. Clearly, there can be more precision on the categorization, and also towards the definition what actually is AI. However, a lot of other organizations also struggle with the one and unique and forever valid definition of AI. It's not existing. Yeah, so there are many definitions out there, and they also change over time. If you look back 30 years, a chess computer would be considered AI. We would not count this as AI today, because it's clearly rule-based as it was programmed. And this will be changing going forward as well. That's why I think these frameworks, they need to be worked on continuously. And at the same time, there should be a safe ground how companies like insurance companies can operate within that framework.
Thank you, Kilian. I know this would be difficult, but I'd like to give you also the word in this final round. I'm not going to ask you about whether the balance of the. I'd like to know if you had one wish towards the legislative process that comes now. What would it be?
Oh, I'm really sorry that you didn't ask me about the balance, because that, of course, I would have loved to answer. But on the no. Obviously, we are in favor, because that's why we produced it. Yes. No, but a wish for this legislative proposal would really be that we manage to find common ground between Council and Parliament rather quickly. Because I think it's an urgent problem. We should here show as Europe that we are able to address innovative technologies. We have an opportunity to have it uniform for all the 27. We can set global benchmarks like for the GDPR. And I think it would really be a missed opportunity if now we would create major conflicts between member states and Parliament, Council and Parliament. I don't know. We will see. But and this would take years. I think that would be a pity. So I hope that all actors in the process will be so wise to look for good and sustainable compromises.
Thank you very much. That's very good to finish on this note. Looking for a compromise, and then it's only left to thank you all for this lively discussion. Thanks to the audience as well for watching us. I'm looking forward to the next sessions in the GDV Live series. Next week we will have a discussion between our CEO and Mr. Pascal Canfin on sustainability. So see you then next week. Thank you very much again, and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.